When the Atari 2600 Plus launched a few months ago, I was pretty excited to get the console. I wanted a way to play my 2600 and 7800 carts on a modern television. I was also pretty excited for the new and re-released games to be launching alongside the 2600 Plus. I first jumped in with Mr. Run and Jump, and I hit myself up berserk with Berserk Enhanced. But the last game on my list was the subject of today's discussion. The Atari 4-in-1 cartridge. Yeah, I know, catchy title, right? This was a slightly more expensive cart than the other two, and since I'd also got the 10-in-1 cart that came with the 2600 Plus itself, I felt I could wait to get this one. You see, the issue is, it then sold out without a sign that it would come back into stock on Amazon. So I figured it must have been a limited release, but I checked online just in case, every so often, and finally it came back into stock. The reason the 4-in-1 cartridge was more expensive than Mr. Run and Jump and Berserk is because the cart, as well as having 4 games on one cartridge, comes with a set of paddles. This is a true old school set of Atari paddles as well, which are the big chunky controllers with a dial and one button on, and oh boy, are they good to use. It's been years since I had proper paddle controllers. If you don't know the history, the paddle controllers are called as such, as these dual-based controllers were what was once made to control Pong and other tennis-inspired video games. Hence they were called paddles, as you would have paddles in ping pong. So instead of holding a ping pong paddle, you were holding this. So these were called paddles, even though it really doesn't make sense in a modern sense. Now, in recent years, I've had the Atari VCS classic joystick, which doubles as a paddle. The stick in the middle can be twiddled around. And then I've had the Retron Ranger gamepad, which has a built-in paddle. And then the Atari Game Station Pro, which also has a built-in dial. So none of these are quite the same as using a legit 2600 style paddle though. They're just too small, you can't get the absolute precision on something quite so tiny. So it'd be like, if I was going to compare it to anything, like trying to control the steering of a car with just like a little knob in the middle. You'd be all over the place by over rotating it too quickly. But enough about the controller, let's look at the games, because this is a 4-in-1 cartridge and they are all designed to be based around using the paddles. First up, we have Breakout, which is awesome. Getting used to the paddle controls does take a little while, but this game is every bit as engaging as I remember. I mean, I say that like I haven't played loads of versions of Breakout across the Atari VCS, the recharged version, the 50th anniversary version, and even the one that you got for the Amico. And yeah, I might do a video on that another day. But it's been a while since I played it with proper paddles and not the small VCS or Game Station Pro ones. But even though I wasn't as amazing as I'd hoped, with a little bit of practice, I'm sure I'll get better. The game, if you don't know, sees you basically play Pong, but instead of an opponent knocking the ball back to you, the ball bounces off a wall, which when you hit it will break apart one brick at a time. The aim is to destroy all the bricks. Some of the challenge comes in that the nearer the bricks are to you, the less time you have to react to where they will bounce to. But the further in you get and the more layers you remove, the faster the ball will bounce back from them. I'll also note that I like the changes of tones from when you make a noise hitting the ball bounce off the further layers of bricks. For me, this was probably my favourite game on the cartridge, but it's pretty close. Next up is Night Driver. I have never been good at this game, and as you'll see in the video, that hasn't changed. Oh, and for full transparency here, when you do see in this video that it looks like I'm doing really well, that's just me letting the demo show you how to do it. Yes, I know, I just let it sit there and it played itself and did a lot better than I could. The aim of the game of Night Driver is to drive at night. You rotate the paddle to steer, and you'll have to be really good and have really sharp reflexes, as you can so easily crash, as I'm sure you're seeing on the video right now. The tip that took me a few plays to begin to understand is that you're best watching the horizon to know where to steer to rather than what's right in front of you. I mean, imagine if you were actually to drive a real car, just looking at what's in the distance and not paying attention to what's near. It's completely back to front. Now, I did start to get some success, but there are occasional cars that you can crash into as well. Weirdly, the graphics on the cars that you crash into seem to be more detailed than your own vehicle, which is about as basic looking as you can get. Along the way, you may see an occasional house or tree that you can pass, and this does give a sense that your car is travelling and moving along somewhere, but don't expect to be blown away by this one. Now then, if I wasn't super thrilled with Night Driver, I was in for a treat with Canyon Bomber. And I don't especially mean that, as there's not much to this one, and whilst it does use the paddle controls, that's only really for a secondary mode on the game. For the most part, you play the game with just the fire button and have to bomb more bricks in the canyon than your opponent. There's an underwater stage where you can play with the paddle involved, and basically the paddle is used to select the depth for which your bombs will explode underwater. This is the only use of the paddle in the game as far as I can tell. Otherwise, it's the entire game just played with the fire button. I'll note at this stage that I did try to play these games with the Retron Ranger controller and found it didn't work, which I was super disappointed about. Not sure why this was, as I'm pretty sure that it was compatible and useful for Mr. Run and Jump. Maybe I've just misremembered. But that's fine, these paddles are the selling point of the package and are both comfortable to play with and very accurate and effective, so no real complaints about them here. Lastly, the fourth game on the cart is Video Olympics. I'll admit, I wasn't expecting I was going to like this. I was like, this is going to be some terrible sports game, and I was pleasantly surprised to find out that basically it's Pong. I was actually surprised that Atari didn't put Pong on the cartridge as a fifth game. I was like, how can they do a paddle game collection and not give you Pong? But then I realised that Video Olympics is a version of Pong. It has about 40 or 50 variants of Pong, tennis, soccer, football and hockey type games that you can play on this, and they're all basically versions of Pong with slightly different setups, and that's awesome. Or at least in theory it is. It's worth noting that the paddles come with two paddles attached to one controller port, and I think all but one variant of Pong on Video Olympics is a multiplayer only game. It does include Pong where you can play against a computer opponent, but all of the football and mixed doubles is seemingly for multiplayer only. I went through a ton of them trying to see if any would be computer controlled against you and you could do it with just one player, but alas, it seems not. Oh well. It's awesome that there is this many variants for people who have someone to play with, but in my circle it's hard enough for me to get couch multiplayer going with Mario Kart, let alone convincing my non-gaming girlfriend or friends to play 1970s retro Pong. I'd say if this offered more for one player, it would be my favourite game on the cart. But as it is, well, I mean, who doesn't enjoy Pong anyway? So look, I'll forgive it. It's a great game. Pong and Breakout definitely make this collection worth it. Night Driver, I might get into it a bit more. And Canyon Bomber, it's fine, but it's just basically nothing to it. So I have to also question though, why they didn't see the sense in putting Pong on there as a fifth standalone game, even if basically you can do Pong in Video Olympics, just because Pong is a name that everyone knows, and Video Olympics I expected to be a terribly dated sports title. So if you want to play some proper paddle games with proper paddles, this is genuinely the best way to do it in 2024. The feel of the paddles and their larger size means it's easier to get precision as is needed with these games when compared to the paddle controls on the VCS controller and the GameStation Pro. Let's just hope Atari creates some original games that use the paddle. Now, I was thinking, because I've been playing with my Playdate handheld console recently that has a crank, that maybe an original game could take some inspiration from the crank and adapt it to play with a paddle. I'd love to see that time travel game, but with Atari 2600 or 7800 graphics. I bet they could make that work. Well, anyway, that's going to wrap things up for this video. So if you haven't done so already, I would really appreciate if you would smash that subscribe button here on the Geek Battle Gaming YouTube channel. As always, head over to www.extreme.tv/gaming for the written article version of this review. And with that, until next time, stay safe, always stay extremed, and ciao for now. Boom! And I'm off the air.